Hello and welcome to On the Record, where we go behind the headlines for hard-hitting analysis with the experts. US stocks have taken a hammering since the re-election of Barack Obama this week. The president's had little time to bask in the glory of his victory over the Republican rival Mitt Romney. Focus now turning just on how the US will deal with that looming fiscal cliff that threatens to plunge the economy back into recession. I sat down with Dr. Harry Melkonian. He's had a glittering career in law, representing clients before the US Supreme Court. He's conducted over 1,000 jury trials and plenty more besides. Now senior lecturer at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Dr. Harry Melkonian, a warm welcome to you. You know, something intriguing happened in the wake of this election in the US, and that is that despite most stocks plunging, the first session and play afterwards, gun plays actually spiked. Now, we know Barack Obama's intent on limiting gun use in his second term, but given the landscape of those he's now opposing or who oppose him, how tough a fight's that likely to be, and just underscoring the battle lines that are being drawn in both houses?
I think it may have been more of an emotional reaction. Barack Obama is a very cautious politician, and he knows that certain issues tend to evoke an enormous amount of emotion, and maybe more emotion than they're really worth. And I don't see him necessarily taking any radical positions on firearms ownership if he anticipates that it will cause too much distraction from the rest of his legislative agenda.
In a sense, you know, you're saying really the rot set in under Reagan, and only now are the structural changes starting to present. So what real choice and option does Obama have to change things like jobs?
The problem is that in the past, resuscitating the economy has been a matter of simply putting people back to work who have been temporarily unemployed, even during the Great Depression. But for the past 30 years, the U.S. has allowed its industrial economy to waste away. And by and large, the industries aren't even there anymore, which poses the president a very significant challenge, much greater than any of his predecessors.
Did you see a real display of that in the composition now of an even more deeply divided House off the back of this? Are voters voting with their feet and putting in place individuals who are going to go against the tide, who are going to make a nuisance, who are really going to stand up for what they want?
I don't think it's that so much, except that local elections in the United States are intensely local. People who voted for President Obama could very well have voted for their local Republican member of the House, or in many cases, and this seems to always happen, people vote for the president and don't bother voting for the House of Representatives because they don't even know who that person is.
What can he do, though, when faced with, as you say, a structural paradigm shift, effectively, even on jobs? We can't go back to any idea of normal if normal is no longer with us.
What it ultimately requires is a recognition by Republicans that you cannot just keep reducing taxes, and a recognition by Democrats you can't keep just increasing services. All of those things require more money.
Well, let's talk Obamacare as one illustration of that. Requiring more money and yet meeting a need that's demonstrably been absent, particularly for a swathe of older voters. The public health system and their access to it. How seminal a moment was that as a Supreme Court win for Obama?
I think it was an enormous turning point. It was essential. It was necessary. The Supreme Court upheld it on narrow grounds, but that really doesn't matter. They upheld it. And it was a peculiar opinion because outside of the Chief Justice, every other justice on the court, including the ones who went along with him, were unhappy with what he did. But the Obamacare is the law now.
You got to know the American people up close like few others, you might well argue, over 1,000 jury trials under your belt. What's your conclusion, with the benefit of hindsight, about the spirit of what makes an American? How do we define being American in this age?
There is still a commonly held belief among Americans of this American exceptionalism. Now, whether it's objectively true or not, I suppose doesn't matter, because if the people believe it, it's part of their nature. There clearly is a willingness of Americans to band together when there is a perceived crisis. It's happened over and over again. The country does not break up. It rather unifies, and it tends to unify around the persona of the president.
Well, could a crisis therefore be what's required in a second term? Heaven forbid, the fiscal cliff is imminent. If the worst were to occur, might there be a silver lining on just what you've said?
Yes, I think there would be, because people would then look to the president, and he would, I think President Obama is of the, has sufficient principles and convictions that he would come forward and say, we have to take some strong medicine now, and everybody's got to join with it because, and then explain why, and that just might work.
Speaking of strong leadership, just like going into court and having an incompetent counsel opposite you, you'd be concerned, I'm guessing, that the Republican Party look divided as never before off the back of this defeat. What happens next? Does House Speaker Boehner sort of preside over an interregnum, and then what needs to then change for the Republicans to be credible?
The Republican Party, you're correct, is divided. Mitt Romney does not go back to any governmental post. He's not a senator or a governor. He basically, to a degree, just disappears into private life. The Speaker of the House, John Boehner, is really not a public person who is in a position to take command of the party. I think right now the Republican Party is somewhat a rudderless ship.
I guess on that score, the ship's either going to sail into a storm, in which case without an anchor anything's possible, or we're looking at a becalmed situation. Either or, so much to play for. Thank you very much for your insights. Appreciate them.